You know Maureen Mccormick as Marcia Brady, the girl next door who defined 1970s television? In this video, I'm revealing 20 such weird facts about Maureen Mccormick that even many die-hard fans don't know. Number 20, the young commercial star who sold everything but herself. Between 1964 and 1968, McCormick appeared in over 40 commercials for Barbie and Kellogg's. Biographers examining her early contracts discovered explicit demeanor clauses banning spontaneous facial gestures that might distract from products. The language was specific, no exaggerated expressions, no improvised movements, no deviation from approved emotional registers. Every commercial shoot became an exercise in controlled presentation. Directors wanted her charm, but only within parameters defined by legal documents. The contracts commodified her facial expressions as intellectual property subject to corporate approval. Therefore, before Marcia Brady, the brand came first. McCormick learned at age 10 that her image belonged to others. Studio executives recognized her marketability, but insisted on managing every visible manifestation. The precedent mattered. These contracts normalized the idea that performer spontaneity could be contractually eliminated. What seemed like boilerplate language represented a philosophy of image control that would follow McCormick for decades. Press celebrated her as natural talent. Legal documents tell a different story: calculated presentation and corporate ownership of identity. Child performers were increasingly viewed as investments requiring protection and control. The irony: America's future perfect daughter spent her earliest professional years learning that perfection was manufactured through legal restrictions and studio oversight. Even her childhood performances operated under constraints audiences never suspected. Studio systems of the 1960s treated young talent as brands to be carefully managed rather than artists to be nurtured. McCormick's commercial contracts reflected this transformation, transferring control from performer to corporation at the most fundamental level. Number 19, her first screen credit was in a Western, not a family comedy. Press archives confirm McCormick's television debut wasn't wholesome family entertainment. Her first credits appeared in Bewitched in 1964 and Honey West in 1965, shows blending mystery, adventure, and supernatural elements. Studio casting notes reveal she was initially groomed for dramatic work, not comedy. Casting directors saw potential for intensity, suggesting a career path towards serious drama. Production memos describe her as possessing unusual gravity for her age, but ABC pivoted to family sitcoms as network strategy. The success of shows like The Partridge Family demonstrated audience appetite for wholesome entertainment. Network meetings from 1968 showed deliberate movement away from genre programming toward domestic comedy. Therefore, McCormick's trajectory changed before she understood what was happening. Casting directors redirected her toward the Brady pilot. The same qualities suitable for serious roles now served an entirely different genre. The decision wasn't based on newly discovered talent. It reflected network business strategy, not artistic assessment. A performer cultivated for one type of work found herself permanently associated with another. Most audiences encountering Marcia Brady had no awareness McCormick had worked in television before. Her previous credits disappeared from popular memory, overshadowed by the role that would define her. Biographers note this as early typecasting before a performer realizes it's happening. The industry made decisions about McCormick's future based on market research and corporate strategy, not her aspirations or demonstrated range. Hollywood careers turn on factors having nothing to do with talent. Network pivots and corporate strategy meetings reshape professional identity without meaningful performer input. Number 18, the color symmetry casting rule. Production documents reveal a rigid aesthetic standard governing Brady Bunch casting. Studio executives implemented what internal memos called a visual harmony rule. All 6 children had to fit pre-selected hair color patterns designed for optimal television presentation. The specifications were detailed. Archived production notes show McCormick's natural blonde was specifically retained for chromatic balance. The Brady children needed to represent a color spectrum that would photograph distinctly in primitive 1969 color television technology. But studio control extended beyond casting. Other cast members had natural hair tones adjusted with wigs or dyes to achieve desired visual palette. Costume and makeup departments maintained charts tracking each performer's assigned color value, ensuring consistency across episodes filmed out of sequence. Biographers cite these documents as evidence of aesthetic standardization in network television. The Brady Bunch wasn't simply cast for acting ability or chemistry. Each performer occupied a specific position within an engineered visual system. McCormick's blonde hair wasn't just a physical characteristic, it was a plot device, a branding element, and a contractual obligation. Her appearance served the show's chromatic strategy, treating human beings as components in designed composition. Therefore, hair pigment became studio-controlled narrative. Natural variation gave way to corporate aesthetic preferences. What audiences perceived as wholesome diversity was actually product of deliberate color theory applied to casting. Press never mentioned these calculations. Critics praised the Brady Bunch for its fresh-faced ensemble without realizing how extensively that ensemble had been engineered. The show looked natural precisely because preparation had been unnatural. These production documents reveal an industry treating television as visual medium first, with performance serving primary goal of aesthetic appeal. The Brady children weren't just actors, they were living components of designed image. A show celebrated for wholesome authenticity was constructed through meticulous artifice, with hair color regulations as binding as any script requirement. Number 17, A Perfect Smile, engineered by the studio dentist. Archived publicity notes describe an unusual pre-production requirement. Before principal photography, Paramount insisted McCormick visit a studio-appointed dentist for comprehensive assessment and ongoing maintenance. The reasoning was explicit in internal memos. Her teeth were considered part of her screen trademark. Therefore, dental care wasn't a health matter. It became a contractual obligation managed by production. McCormick received weekly dental visits during active filming scheduled around production calls. These weren't emergency interventions. They were preventive maintenance sessions ensuring her smile remained consistent across episodes that might air months apart. Studio records logged dental appointments alongside costume fittings and makeup tests. Her teeth occupied the same administrative category as wigs and wardrobe. The dental work wasn't separate from production, it was production. The arrangement revealed how studios understood performer identity. McCormick's natural smile apparently required professional intervention to achieve expected perfection. What audiences perceived as effortless beauty was a result of ongoing clinical maintenance. In a 1972 interview, she joked her contract included more dental visits than dialogue changes. The comment acknowledged an unusual truth. Her body had become studio property in ways extending beyond performance. Consider the precedent. If studios could mandate dental maintenance as production requirement, what other physical aspects fell under corporate control? The Brady Bunch operated when such interventions seemed normal, even necessary. Therefore, behind every perfect smile was literal studio maintenance, scheduled, documented, and contractually enforced. McCormick's teeth weren't just her own. They were assets requiring professional management to protect the show's visual brand. Biographers note this as emblematic of how thoroughly studios controlled performer presentation during network television studio era. Every visible element could be subject to corporate oversight, managed as carefully as any set decoration. Press celebrated McCormick's wholesome beauty without questioning the industrial infrastructure, maintaining that beauty between takes. Number 16. Her first recording contract was secretly shelved. In 1972, McCormick recorded several solo pop tracks under Paramount's music division. Session notes from Western recorders show her vocals tested well with focus groups assembled to assess commercial potential. But executives buried the release. Internal memos cited concerns about protecting the Brady brand's innocence. The reasoning was explicit, allowing McCormick to pursue pop music might complicate her image as wholesome Marcia Brady. Consider what that meant. A performer had demonstrated musical ability, completed professional recordings, and received positive test results. None of that mattered when measured against corporate brand management. Therefore, McCormick's recordings remained in Paramount's vaults for decades. Press coverage from 1972 makes no mention of the sessions, suggesting the decision to shelve happened before any public announcement. The music existed, but was denied existence. The tracks themselves reveal competence. Biographers who accessed the recordings describe them as radio-friendly pop that would have fit alongside the Partridge Family or the Osmonds. There was no quality issue justifying Suppression. But studio executives weren't making artistic judgments. They were protecting an investment. The Brady Bunch generated substantial revenue through syndication and merchandise. Any action complicating family-friendly positioning threatened that revenue. McCormick wasn't fighting the studio for creative control. She was following opportunities offered by the same studio employing her. But corporate caution overruled artistic ambition. The recordings resurfaced only in the 1990s on fan archives. By then, they served as historical curiosities rather than legitimate releases, footnotes rather than chapters. What seemed like corporate caution in 1972 looked like missed opportunity decades later. The decision revealed studios prioritizing brand consistency over artist development, even when both could have coexisted. A career that could have gone pop was quietly silenced, not through explicit prohibition, but through passive suppression, amounting to the same result. Number 15, a stage play the network tried to hide. In 1974, McCormick accepted a minor role in a Los Angeles stage production titled Windmills. The play ran limited engagement at a regional theater, attracting little attention and smaller audiences. Network PR teams responded with surprising intensity. Press records show ABC's publicity department requested she omit windmills from interviews to avoid misinterpretation of image. The guidance was delivered through her management, framed as protective advice rather than explicit prohibition. The play involved more mature themes than typical Brady episodes, though by contemporary standards the content was tame. Production notes describe it as relationship drama exploring adult disillusionment. The material wasn't scandalous, but it wasn't wholesome family entertainment. Therefore, artistic curiosity could violate a studio's moral template. Network executives understood audiences associated McCormick with Marcia Brady regardless of other projects. Any role suggesting adult complexity threatened that association, potentially diminishing syndication value. Studios didn't simply control performers during production. They attempted to manage off-screen activities that might influence public perception. Theater work, charity appearances, and personal projects all fell under informal but powerful oversight. Consider the position for young performers. Their careers existed in permanent surveillance, with publicity departments monitoring extracurricular activities for potential image conflicts. The boundary between professional obligation and personal freedom became impossible to locate. McCormick's participation in windmills did get documented in regional theater press. Critics mentioned her presence, describing her stage work as earnest but limited by the play's modest ambitions. Those reviews, largely forgotten, reveal a performer testing artistic boundaries despite network resistance. Biographers note the subtle but effective mechanisms studios employed to discourage unauthorized creativity. Rather than contractual prohibition, they used professional guidance and publicity management to shape performer behavior. The control was real but difficult to challenge because it operated through suggestion. Even minor artistic exploration required navigating network concerns about brand integrity. A small regional play posed existential questions about image ownership, who controlled McCormick's professional identity, and what boundaries existed on her artistic freedom. The answer, uncomfortable but clear: network interests superseded personal ambition. Even off-screen, McCormick remained contractually Marcia Brady. Number 14, the Brady Kids cartoon paid her by the line, not the episode. When the Brady Kids animated series launched in 1972, production documents reveal unusual compensation. Unlike traditional animation contracts paying performers per episode, this production compensated by individual recorded lines. Each spoken sentence carried its own negotiated value. McCormick's character had limited dialogue in most episodes. The show's format emphasized ensemble storytelling with rotating focus, meaning some episodes featured her prominently, while others relegated her to background reactions. Therefore, her compensation varied dramatically episode to episode. Production records from Filmation Studios show McCormick earned less than half her sitcom salary for cartoon voice work, despite the show trading directly on Brady Bunch brand recognition. The per-line payment meant she could spend equal time in a recording booth, but received drastically different compensation depending on script allocation. But McCormick recorded every line in person, maintaining continuity despite unfavorable payment terms. Studio notes indicate she never missed a session or requested contract renegotiation. Her loyalty to the franchise superseded financial optimization. Consider what that reveals about performer relationships with long-running properties. The Brady Bunch had provided career-defining visibility. Participating in franchise extensions, even under disadvantageous terms, served long-term brand association more than short-term income. Therefore, McCormick found herself in a curious position, a top-billed actress from successful sitcom being paid by syllable for voiceover work. The arrangement reflected animation economics, treating voice acting as subordinate to visual production, regardless of performer status. Press coverage never mentioned compensation structures. Entertainment journalism focused on the novelty of animated Brady adventures, not business arrangements making those adventures viable for studios while potentially disadvantageous for performers. Studios experimented with payment structures to control costs while leveraging established properties. Per-line compensation represented one strategy for managing voice budgets, transferring financial risk from studios to performers. Biographers cite cartoon compensation as emblematic of how franchise extensions could simultaneously benefit and exploit performers. McCormick gained additional exposure, but under terms valuing her contribution primarily as brand maintenance rather than creative work. A performer synonymous with American television was literally paid by the word for extending that iconography into new media, making her among the most visible yet least financially rewarded voices in animated television. Number 13, the dating ban clause? Studio management at ABC imposed explicit public dating ban on all Brady children under 18. The restriction was documented in contract writers, though archived legal documents show language carefully crafted to avoid labor law violations. The prohibition targeted public appearances with romantic partners, not private relationships. The restriction specified young cast members could not be photographed on dates, could not attend public events with romantic interests, and could not discuss dating in press interviews. The justification was maintaining family illusion, preserving audience belief in Brady children as wholesome innocents. But enforcement created complications. Archival memos from ABC's publicity department reveal coordination with paparazzi photographers to avoid capturing Brady cast in compromising social situations. The studio negotiated informal agreements with entertainment press to suppress coverage of teenage dating. Therefore, McCormick and castmates had to structure social lives around corporate image requirements. In later interviews, she described arranging dates off hours and off lots, scheduling personal time around production to minimize public visibility. Consider what that meant practically. Normal adolescent experiences became covert operations requiring planning typically associated with scandal management. Teenagers under contract couldn't attend school dances or meet friends at restaurants without considering publicity consequences. The dating ban extended surreal fiction into real life. The Brady Bunch depicted idealized family with teenagers who experienced chaste romantic interest within controlled storylines. But actors portraying those children had to suppress actual romantic lives to preserve fictional ideal. Press coverage shows how effectively the restriction worked. Entertainment journalism about the Brady Bunch focused almost exclusively on cast camaraderie and wholesome dynamics. Coverage of personal lives remained virtually non-existent until they aged out of contractual restrictions. Studios treated teenage performers as corporate assets, requiring protection from their own normal development. Dating wasn't prohibited because it was inappropriate, it was managed because it complicated brand positioning. Biographers note this as evidence of how thoroughly studios controlled young performers. The boundary between professional obligation and personal autonomy effectively disappeared, with contract language extending corporate authority into private life. The restriction lifted when cast members turned 18, but patterns were established. Years of hiding normal relationships created habits of privacy and guardedness, persisting long after contractual obligations ended. A surreal extension of fiction into real adolescence, and reminder that television fame often included surrendering ordinary developmental experiences to corporate image management. Number 12. A crossed-out script line that changed television etiquette. During production of the 1973 episode Marcia Gets Creamed, archived script drafts reveal a minor editorial change that established lasting precedent. The original shooting script included a line where Marcia referenced a romantic date. CBS censors replaced it with school dance. The substitution appears in revised scripts marked with standardized editing codes, indicating compliance requirements rather than creative revision. But the change carried significance beyond that single episode. Production memos from CBS Standards Office show the edit was circulated as example guidance for other family sitcom productions. The specific language adjustment became template instruction for how writers should frame teenage romantic content across multiple shows. Therefore, one crossed-out line influenced television content standards for years. The Marcia Gets Creamed revision was cited in standards memos through the remainder of the 1970s as demonstrating appropriate boundaries. Writers on unrelated shows encountered restrictions based directly on this Brady precedent. Consider what that single edit accomplished. It established that teenage romantic experiences, even when treated with complete innocence, required euphemistic framing in network family programming. Direct language about dating became, by corporate decree, inappropriate for early evening time slots. One editorial decision scaled across the industry. CBS Standards used Brady Bunch as testing ground for content boundaries, then exported those boundaries to dozens of other productions. A line cut from one script became unwritten law governing an entire genre. Press coverage never mentioned content review processes. Television criticism focused on storylines and performances, not extensive censorship apparatus operating behind every script. Audiences had no awareness that innocuous dialogue had been negotiated through multiple review layers. Content standards became increasingly formalized, with specific precedents establishing rigid boundaries for acceptable language. Brady Bunch, as flagship family programming, served as primary case study for these evolving restrictions. Biographers examining television history cite the Marcia Gets Creamed edit as emblematic of how conservative content standards became embedded in production processes. Small decisions accumulated into comprehensive restrictions shaping an entire era. A show celebrating wholesome American family life helped create censorship frameworks extending far beyond its own production, influencing television content for audiences who never watched a single Brady episode. Number 11. The reunion special that almost didn't happen. When A Very Brady Christmas was announced in 1988, production documents reveal McCormick initially declined participation. Contract negotiations preserved in CBS archives show she cited scheduling conflicts and unresolved disputes about residual payments from original syndication. Network executives faced unprecedented problem. Their flagship Brady property couldn't function without complete cast participation. Internal memos show NBC executives seriously considered recasting Marcia Brady for the first time. But recasting posed existential challenges. Reunion specials depended on nostalgic recognition. Audiences wanted original cast embodying familiar characters decades later. Introducing a new actress as Marcia would fundamentally undermine that premise, potentially destroying commercial viability. Therefore, NBC initiated intensive negotiations with McCormick's representatives. Contract documents show the network offered improved compensation, more favorable residual arrangements, and certain creative input regarding her storyline. Negotiations extended over several weeks, delaying production and creating uncertainty. Consider what McCormick's leverage revealed. After years of typecasting and career struggles, she possessed unique bargaining power. The reunion couldn't succeed without her, giving her rare negotiating advantage in an industry where she'd spent years accepting whatever opportunities emerged. Press coverage when A Very Brady Christmas aired made no mention of negotiation drama. Entertainment journalists celebrated the cast reunion as inevitable and joyful, unaware how close the project came to fundamental compromise. The wholesome gathering audiences saw masked months of business conflicts. After extended negotiation, McCormick agreed to participate. Her return preserved continuity that fans still cite as the glue of the reunion. Without her, the special would have been different, diminished, possibly unsuccessful. Nostalgia had transformed into commercial infrastructure by the late 1980s. Reunion specials weren't artistic projects. They were calculated business ventures trading on audience affection for canceled properties. Biographers note McCormick's brief refusal as rare moment of professional agency in a career largely defined by limited choices. The Brady Bunch had created her fame and constrained her options. The reunion negotiation represented one of few occasions where she could assert terms rather than accept them. Sometimes the simplest yes safeguards an entire nostalgia economy. McCormick's decision to return enabled decades of Brady franchise extensions, from theatrical films to reality shows, all dependent on maintaining continuity with original casting. Number 10. The lost teen years the studio couldn't control. By 1975, the Brady Bunch had ended, leaving McCormick facing transition from child performer to adult actress. Casting directors saw only Marcia Brady. The roles offered represented near-identical characters, wholesome teenagers in family-friendly productions. Scripts arrived describing parts as suitable for the former Marcia Brady. She auditioned for dramatic roles in television movies and independent films. According to casting records, she read well, but was consistently passed over for actresses without her baggage of existing audience associations. Casting directors praised her professionalism in feedback notes, but selected performers who wouldn't carry predetermined audience expectations. Press accounts described calculated withdrawal. Rather than accepting compromised roles, McCormick stepped back from auditions to study theater privately. Enrollment records from Los Angeles acting studio show she took classes in method acting, voice work, and stage presence. But when she returned to auditioning several years later, casting directors still saw only Marcia Brady. The additional training hadn't erased audience associations. If anything, her absence had intensified her identification with the character she'd played years earlier. Early success can foreclose future possibilities, trapping performers inside identities they embodied but don't control. Number 9. The role she fought for and lost to image politics. In 1976, McCormick auditioned for the new CBS sitcom One Day at a Time. She pursued the role of Barbara Cooper, the older daughter character, suggesting both wholesome responsibility and emerging independence. Casting notes preserved in CBS archives indicate McCormick delivered strong test readings. Director and producer feedback described her performance as confident, naturalistic, and age-appropriate. Multiple callbacks suggested serious consideration. But CBS executives intervened in final casting. Internal network memos explained their reasoning with surprising candor. They feared McCormick's Brady legacy would distract audiences from the new show's premise. Viewers encountering her as Barbara Cooper might struggle to separate performer from Marcia Brady, potentially undermining One Day at a Time's distinct identity. Therefore, despite strong auditions and positive creative team response, McCormick was passed over for Valerie Bertinelli, whose relative obscurity allowed audiences to encounter Barbara Cooper without predetermined associations. The decision privileged narrative clarity over individual performer merit. Consider what that rejection revealed. Fame itself became disqualifying, and not because McCormick lacked talent, but because her existing fame created cognitive obstacles for audience acceptance of new characters. Press coverage of One Day at a Time's casting made no mention of McCormick's audition. Entertainment journalism announced Bertinelli's selection without discussing other candidates, preserving the illusion that casting emerged from straightforward talent evaluation. But for McCormick, the rejection carried deeper significance. One Day at a Time represented exactly the kind of role that could have helped transition her from child performer to adult actress. The show tackled substantive family issues with sophistication beyond typical sitcom fare. Valerie Bertinelli achieved sustained success playing Barbara Cooper across 9 seasons, while McCormick spent the same period struggling for consistent work. The role McCormick fought for would have fundamentally altered her career trajectory. Biographers cite the One Day at a Time rejection as the moment when typecasting's consequences became undeniable. The Brady Bunch's success had simultaneously made McCormick famous and unemployable in roles requiring audience acceptance of her as anyone other than Marcia Brady. Proof that fame can quietly shut more doors than it opens, and that the industry's long memory of who performers once were often matters more than assessments of who they might become. Number 8. An attempted pivot to country music. By 1979, McCormick had married actor Michael Cummings and was attempting career reinvention. She recorded a country album titled When You Get a Little Lonely, released under her married name rather than her professionally established identity. The decision signaled hope of escaping Brady associations through strategic rebranding. Production notes describe competent country pop with production values comparable to contemporary Nashville releases. Session musicians included respected studio players. Music critics who reviewed the album described McCormick's vocals as unexpectedly strong and well-suited to country material. But distribution presented immediate problems. Record labels struggled with fundamental strategic questions: how to position a performer primarily known for television comedy attempting to establish credibility in country music. Initial promotional materials emphasized her television background, treating musical career as extension of Brady fame. Therefore, the album launched under contradictory messaging. Some materials highlighted her as former Marcia Brady, attempting to leverage name recognition. Others avoided television references entirely, presenting her as emerging country artist named Maureen Cummings. The inconsistent positioning confused potential audiences and radio programmers. Country press coverage reflected that confusion. Reviews acknowledged musical competence but spent disproportionate attention on McCormick's television background. Several critics explicitly questioned whether audiences could accept Marcia Brady as credible country performer. Radio airplay remained minimal. Country programmers, surveyed in trade publications, expressed concern that McCormick's television association would prevent listeners from taking music seriously. Singles received limited rotation, primarily on smaller regional stations. Consider the paradox. McCormick possessed genuine musical ability and had produced professionally competitive material. But the industry infrastructure distributing that material couldn't separate performer from previous persona, even when she attempted rebranding through different name. The entertainment industry claims to value versatility, but operates through rigid categorization, making crossover between domains extremely difficult. McCormick's television success created audience expectations her musical work couldn't overcome. Biographers describe When You Get a Little Lonely as unexpectedly strong work that deserved better reception. The album's commercial failure reflected industry structures and audience psychology more than musical quality. Being trapped by one television role meant no rebranding strategy, regardless of how thoroughly executed, could erase established audience associations. Number 7. The unseen pilot that cost a year. In 1980, McCormick filmed a television pilot titled Love Thy Neighbor. Production was multi-camera sitcom format, shot before live studio audience. The pilot aimed to showcase McCormick in contemporary adult role, positioning her as young professional navigating urban life. Production records reveal filming proceeded smoothly, with director and cast describing positive on-set dynamics. Network development executives attended taping and provided generally favorable responses. The pilot entered standard testing, where focus groups evaluate potential series viability. But audience testing revealed devastating results. Focus group participants, whose responses were documented in market research reports, consistently expressed confusion about McCormick's casting. Multiple test subjects explicitly referenced Marcia Brady, indicating difficulty accepting McCormick as the adult character she portrayed. Therefore, despite competent production and satisfactory performances, NBC executives declined to order the series. Internal network memos attributed the decision to confusion with sitcom identity, the phrase that had haunted McCormick's career since The Brady Bunch ended. Consider what that rejection meant practically. McCormick had invested approximately 1 year in developing, casting, rehearsing, and filming the pilot. She had turned down other opportunities during that period. When the pilot was shelved, that entire year of professional investment disappeared. Press coverage of the 1980 television season made no mention of Love Thy Neighbor. The pilot never aired, even as summer replacement or late-night filler. It simply vanished into network archives. But for McCormick specifically, the failure carried accumulated weight. This wasn't her first attempt at post-Brady television work. It was latest in a series of promising opportunities that collapsed when networks or audiences couldn't separate her from Marcia Brady. Individual rejections might seem like normal industry vicissitudes, but the pattern revealed systemic obstacles rather than temporary setbacks. McCormick faced not random bad luck, but structural impediments rooted in how television fame operates. Biographers note the Love Thy Neighbor failure as particularly demoralizing moment. By 1980, McCormick had spent nearly a decade attempting career transition with minimal success. The pilot's collapse suggested that no amount of effort could overcome audience associations. A year of work vanished overnight. Another reminder that industry memory can be both blessing and burden, creating opportunities for some while foreclosing possibilities for others trapped inside their own histories. Number 6. Her memoir nearly blocked by legal review. Before publication in 2008, McCormick's memoir Here's the Story faced extensive studio legal clearance. Publishing industry documents reveal the manuscript required 6 months of legal review before Harper Entertainment could finalize publication. The memoir included references to specific Brady Bunch episodes, behind-the-scenes production details, and quoted dialogue from scripts. CBS and Paramount claimed these elements required permission under trademark and copyright protections. Studio attorneys also questioned whether McCormick's accounts of production processes, contract terms, and business arrangements violated non-disclosure provisions from her original employment contracts. Some language from 1960s performer agreements remained legally binding decades later. Publishing correspondence shows repeated manuscript revisions as legal teams requested removal or modification of specific details. Some anecdotes were eliminated entirely. The published memoir represented negotiated document rather than unfiltered account. McCormick couldn't write about her most famous work without corporate legal approval. She literally needed permission to describe her own lines. Press coverage of Here's the Story focused primarily on McCormick's personal struggles with substance use. Entertainment journalism ignored legal battles preceding publication. To tell her own story, McCormick needed permission from the same studios whose control had created the story worth telling. Number 5. The reality TV return that redefined nostalgia marketing. VH1's Celebrity Fit Club in 2007 represented McCormick's return to regular television after years of limited visibility. The reality show's premise, helping former celebrities lose weight, might have seemed like career desperation. But the show's producers, according to development notes, specifically saw performers whose fame represented distinct cultural moments. McCormick wasn't trying to revive fading career, she was representing an entire era of television history. For the first time in decades, media coverage wasn't entirely filtered through Marcia Brady. Reality television's format allowed audiences to encounter her as herself rather than as a character. Media scholars examining Celebrity Fit Club's cultural impact noted McCormick generated disproportionate viewer interest. Her presence attracted audiences curious about what had happened to Brady Bunch stars, creating case study and nostalgia demographics. VH1's programming executives recognized her value as living connection to television history. Later network marketing materials explicitly cited Celebrity Fit Club as turning point in nostalgia programming, demonstrating that older performers could attract audiences through authentic presentation rather than comeback narratives. McCormick's appearance helped establish reality television as legitimate venue for former network performers, creating opportunities that hadn't existed when scripted casting remained closed. Biographers cite Celebrity Fit Club as McCormick's most successful career reinvention, not because it led to acting opportunities, but because it allowed her to reclaim authorship over her public identity. Number 3. The lost pilot tape rediscovered decades later. In 2019, film archivists working through Paramount Studios' vault holdings located a Brady Bunch audition reel, mislabeled and incorrectly stored for decades. The footage, shot during 1968 casting sessions, showed McCormick rehearsing scenes with alternate cast configurations that never appeared in the final series. The audition footage revealed McCormick had originally screen tested alongside different actors for the Mike and Carol Brady roles. Production notes attached to footage indicated casting directors evaluated multiple ensemble combinations before finalizing the Brady family configuration. But the footage showed something unexpected about McCormick's performance style. At 14, she approached the Marcia Brady character with noticeably different energy than would characterize her later work. The audition performance was more theatrical, with broader gestures and more emphatic line deliveries. Therefore, the rediscovered footage documented not just casting process, but performance evolution. Between audition and series premiere, McCormick had modified her approach substantially, developing the more naturalistic style that would define Marcia Brady. Television historians examining the footage cite it as rare documentation of how performers adjust during pre-production development. Most audition material from this era was discarded or recorded over, making the mislabeled Brady reels unusually valuable. Consider what the footage reveals about casting as iterative process. The Brady Bunch that premiered in 1969 represented one possibility among many explored during development. Different casting decisions would have produced fundamentally different show chemistry. Press coverage when the discovery was announced generated substantial fan interest. Entertainment media outlets embedded clips from audition footage in articles celebrating Brady nostalgia. For many viewers, seeing early versions of the cast created unexpected emotional response, simultaneous recognition, and strangeness. But the footage's primary value emerged in academic contexts. Film and television studies programs began using the Brady audition reel as teaching tool for analyzing casting evolution and ensemble chemistry development. McCormick's audition became case study material for courses on television acting. The mislabeled footage demonstrated that vast quantities of production material remained uncatalogued in studio vaults, potentially containing historically significant documentation of television development. Biographers examining McCormick's career noted the audition footage as revealing the performer she might have become under different directorial guidance. The theatrical energy evident in her screen tests suggested capabilities the Brady format never fully explored. Even discarded footage can rewrite television history, transforming forgotten material into evidence that challenges accepted narratives about how iconic performances emerged. Number 2, the reunion that became an academic case study. The Brady Bunch movie, released in 1995, represented an unusual Hollywood experiment, a big-budget theatrical film that simultaneously celebrated and satirized its source material. Film scholars at UCLA and USC began analyzing the movie as meta-commentary on 1970s idealism colliding with 1990s cynicism. Researchers conducting interviews specifically sought out McCormick's perspectives on watching her iconic character reinterpreted through postmodern irony. Her archival interviews were cited extensively in scholarly papers as first-hand evidence of cultural translation. Scholars identified the film as sophisticated examination of how 1990s America understood its 1970s past. The premise, the Brady family unchanged in transformed world, became metaphor for examining cultural shifts. McCormick's image and the character she'd created became academic case studies about American innocence and cultural memory. Her work was being analyzed in university classrooms, generating scholarly publications examining the semiotics of Marcia Brady. Film studies journals contain multiple references to McCormick's Brady work, treating it as primary source material for understanding television's role in constructing American cultural identity. After years of being told her Brady association limited her career, she discovered that same association had generated intellectual interest extending beyond entertainment industry concerns. McCormick increasingly embraced her role as television historian, accepting speaking engagements at universities and film preservation organizations. Her career had become the lens through which America examined its own innocence. Number 1, the paradox of America's perfect daughter. In retrospective interviews conducted across decades, McCormick repeatedly reflected on the fundamental paradox defining her career. The world wanted Marcia Brady wholesome, uncomplicated, eternally optimistic, but that same world showed limited interest in Maureen Mccormick. the actress who had created that character. Every professional opportunity was filtered through audience expectations rooted in work she'd completed before turning 18. The character she played for 5 television seasons outweighed everything else. But McCormick eventually transformed that paradox into authorship. Rather than fighting industry perceptions, she began leveraging her unique position as both participant in and symbol of television history. Her 2008 memoir represented the first major step, publicly claiming authority over her own narrative. She accepted speaking engagements discussing typecasting and child performer experiences. She participated in Brady reunion specials, but negotiated terms acknowledging her role in creating the value being commercialized. She became consultant on television preservation efforts. The transformation required accepting she would never fully escape Marcia Brady. But acceptance wasn't surrender. The character's cultural permanence created unique opportunities unavailable to performers without equivalent iconic associations. While many former child stars either succumbed to industry pressures or left entertainment entirely, McCormick found third path. She testified before congressional committees about child performer protections. She worked with television archives preserving Brady production materials. She gave university lectures analyzing her own work as historical artifact. Biographers call it the rare case of an actress outliving her archetype. McCormick didn't escape Marcia Brady, but she didn't remain trapped inside that identity either. She transformed liability into specialized knowledge. The typecasting that closed casting directors' doors opened opportunities in television preservation, cultural commentary, and media literacy education. Her inability to escape one role became foundation for a career based on analyzing why such roles remain culturally powerful. While other Brady casters continued pursuing traditional acting with mixed results, McCormick alone positioned herself as primary authority on the show's cultural significance. Through memoir, speaking tours, and preservation work, McCormick turned the paradox that limited her career into foundation for different professional life. One built not on performing new roles, but on contextualizing the role that made her famous. From the golden studio age to the era of televised nostalgia, Maureen Mccormick's story mirrors the evolution of American fame itself, carefully built, challenged, and finally reclaimed. Her journey reminds us that the spotlight often hides stranger truths behind the scenes. If you like this video, you may also like other videos in our channel about beautiful ladies of yesteryear.